Hi everyone, this is Unpunched. I'm here with Jay Cormier. He's a board game designer of such fantastic hits as In the Hall of the Mountain King, Belfort, and the new psychic detective game Mind Management. Also creator of the Fail Faster game design journal. Welcome to the show.
Why, thank you very much. Wonderful. I love those kind of intros. This is wonderful.
Well, welcome, Jay. So I would love to talk to you about basically how you got into the journey. So you're based out of Vancouver, Canada, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I started off in Ontario with my best friend Sen Fung Lim, and we decided to start making board games a long time ago because we like board games and we're both creative people, but we failed miserably at it. We made one game and we couldn't figure out why it wasn't working it worked in our head and it just wouldn't work when we played it. And so we just probably a lot of people slowly got more and more disinterested in talking about it and doing anything, and eventually stopped talking about it altogether. And we just quit becoming game designers. So that's chapter one of our game designer life.
Chapter one is quit, and then then the success comes after.
Much after.
Yeah. What games did you guys play that really kind of got you into it?
I remember a game called Big City. I really enjoyed that one. I thought that was different and had these plastic buildings that you had to play. So that kind of stuff was really amazing to me. Or Titan the Arena. And even before that, we were playing games like Supremacy, big kind of war games, which is weird for me because I don't play war games now anymore. So that's pretty funny that I started playing those kind of games. But I liked how it had phase selection where it had 7 phases, but you could only ever choose 3. And that was a new concept to me. That was a nice, smart thing. And so it was appealing to me. So how you can do a risk-like game, but add this other layer of, no, you can only do 3 things this turn. What do you want to do? And ooh, that's decisions, meaty. Loved it. And then Magic the Gathering was a huge gateway into the newer world of games.
When you were growing up, how did you discover new games?
I guess I was in the geeky club, so I played games with my geeky friends. So we played Car Wars and D&D and Pole Economy, which is a great Canadian ripoff of a Monopoly type game, but with more layers to it. It's totally extinct now, and it's not a great game, but it was better than Monopoly because it actually had decisions and actual interesting things from my perspective. I liked it a lot better. And then all the kind of party games that you play, like even Trivial Pursuit, which as a kid you're terrible at because you don't know anything, but I still love playing it because it was a game, and I just love playing games.
What would you describe your first foray into going from playing games into designing games? What was that step like?
Chapter 1 that I just mentioned earlier, where my best friend and I decided, let's make a game. We're creative, we're fun people, let's do it, and we like each other. Let's do something together. And I liked Indiana Jones a lot, so he was cool with, let's make a exploring through a jungle type game, and we had treasure maps, and we're trying to connect treasure maps to make treasure, and we couldn't figure it out. It was really, really hard, and we didn't know why it didn't work. We just couldn't figure it out, and we just kind of got, I guess, bored from failing so much that we just kind of stopped working on it. So it was really overall felt like a negative experience.
It happens sometimes. There's definitely a lot of struggles I know I had as well, just kind of making that step and deciding if it was for me or not. I do want to talk about your friendship with Sen from Lim, and you guys basically joining forces together to make the Bamboozle Brothers. And what do you feel like working together with a friend was like in that designing process? Do you feel like that helped you a lot? You had complementing
Yeah, 100%. There's a couple ways of looking at it. One is we kind of believe in this mantra of we call it be your own MVP. In the board game world, MVP can mean a couple of things. Most valuable player, everyone knows that. In board game world, sometimes it's called minimal viable product. We're not talking about either of those. We have our own MVP. And in order to be successful as a game designer, we believe that you have to have motivation, versatility, and positive persistence. And so motivation is really tricky, as is evident from our chapter 1 story of us failing and giving up. And we just didn't have the motivation to continue. And so what the trick was that I actually moved to a totally different province. And because we were separated, we needed to use technology to stay connected with. And if you're familiar with the law of reciprocity, we would have a forum in which one of us would have an idea and we would post it. And then the other one would read it. And the law of reciprocity states that, well, you wrote something, I need to respond, and I will respond. And by responding, you're building on it. And then the other person would feel like they would need to respond. And eventually we'd get to a point where, like, this is a great idea. Let's make this game. And so through that, and we would have so many different threads going off all these different games, keeping track of all of our thoughts. And it was way better than email, because you'd lose all those track of everything. This kept everything in a line. That was our big key to keeping us motivated. And the fact that the V, which is versatility, that helped us as well, because Sen and I fortunately had the same goal, the same objective, and that was, we just want to get a game published because that would be cool. That was it. And we didn't care which game. Some people have a very specific goal, like, I want this game published. That's my goal, is to get this game published. And that's fine. But because Sen and I like a ton of different games, we made a ton of different games. And when I, at the early stages, I was the one going around pitching, because Sen had young kids. And so I go to these conventions and pitch. And I would notice that there were some publishers I would go around to, I couldn't pitch anything to, because we didn't have like a party game or something like that. So I'd go back to Sen. I'm like, next time I go to a convention, we got to make sure we have, something for every publisher. So let's work on a party. So we'd fill our gaps to make sure we have something for everyone. And I think that's really helped us as game designers. We've kind of got a bit of a small reputation in the industry for being very versatile in the kinds of games we design, from junk art, where you have these blocks that you're balancing, to Belfort, a meaty, Euro strategy game, to party games like But Wait, There's More, and Rock, Paper, Wizard that use your hand gestures, like all these different types of games. I think that's really helped us. And then positive persistence is just not giving up, and just, you're going to get a lot of rejection from not from each other, but from publishers that say it's not right for us. Keep going. And so you need those three things in order to be successful. And I think that's our key.
Yeah, I find that key, that persistence, is sometimes something that a lot of people struggle with, at least starting out.
Yeah, I find that it doesn't bother me anymore. It used to. I think early on it really sucks to get a no, because it feels like you're hinging your whole future, like, my future could go on this tangent if they say yes, and it doesn't. So it feels like really disappointing. And while it's still disappointing, my perspective has shifted such that sometimes the game is not just right for them. It might be still an awesome game. It's maybe just not right for them because it doesn't fit with what they're doing or whatever. And so I'm more comfortable with that. And I really love it when they give me feedback about why it doesn't fit for them, because then at least I'm getting information about that publisher. And if I want to make more games for that publisher, I know a little bit better about what they're looking for.
At the point when you started pitching, what was your career like? Were you already focused on had a job and were kind of focused on that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Full-time job. I've been at that same job now for 25 years. So just having a nice stable job has definitely been a benefit in becoming a game designer, is having some stability and dependability on income. I couldn't have quit any of my job. Even up till now, I'm still not haven't quit my day job.
Well, let's talk a bit about pitching. So you've done a lot of pitches now to basically everyone in the industry, from big to small. And have you noticed that there's any like common mistakes that people make, or when people are pitching to you, have you noticed things in their pitches that you liked or disliked?
The two of the biggest things I would say, one is, and it's an easy thing to say, but confidence goes a long ways. And it's easy to say, hey, be confident about your product, but publishers like to partner with someone who is confident about the product. Now, I'm not talking about being cocky and saying this is the best game since Monopoly or whatever. Like, you don't want to say that kind of hyperbole, but being being confident and not hesitant and not apologizing, and just being confident. Yeah, this game does something really clever. I really want to show you this. I'm really excited about this. You can say that. You can say, I'm really excited about this. This, I think, is going to really turn some heads. Check this out. When this phase happens, you get to do this. And just being really, forthright and confident about it is pretty good. The second biggest mistake I see is a lot of new designers will spend a lot of time in their beginning of their pitch trying to set up the world or the lore of this universe of the game that they exist in. And unless it's a role-playing game, most publishers don't care that much yet about that. They want to know what is unique, what is cool about your game and the game mechanics and how it works, and why is it going to have table presence, or why is it going to stand out, or why should this game exist in the world because it does something that no other game does. What is that thing? And explaining the lore about the king does this, and there's all these demons, and there's a level, and like publishers are just going, get to tell me, so maybe one sentence at the most to describe the setting so they get it. That's about it.
Well, that's fantastic. I think now would be a good time. Tell us about the pitch project that you were working on.
Yeah, that happened last year. So I just kind of noticed that there was the pandemic was happening. I didn't notice that. Everyone noticed that. I noticed what I noticed was that during the pandemic, there was no real pitching going on. It was very hard because there was no conventions. Board game conventions are where most people pitch games. Maybe that might not even be true, but it feels at the very least that's where most publishers expect to be pitched to, is at conventions. And they dedicate people to come to conventions just to hear pitches for their next games. And without conventions happening, it feels like it's a lose-lose situation for designers and publishers. And so I thought, I wonder if there's something we could do. And I partnered up with Sen and a guy named Tyler Smith, who at the time was running a company called D6 Publisher Resources, who was like a fulfillment company for Kickstarter games and stuff like that in Canada. And we partnered up and kind of created the pitch project, created a website. And the concept was that it was open to game designers to submit like what we call a sell sheet, a one-page overview of your game, just a one-pager with some images and stuff like that. And you would upload it to our site. And we hired like 30 plus judges to review, and each sell sheet had to be reviewed by 3 different judges and get ranked on different criteria. And after all that was said and done, we ranked all the sell sheets, and we had 750 sell sheets submitted, and they all got ranked, and the top 50 got to present and pitch live to 40 plus publishers that signed up to listen to these pitches. And so yeah, and they got like only 5 minutes, but boom, 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 back to back to back with some Q&A from Sen and I afterwards. I'm like, oh, how's this working? How's that working? We went through it all, and pretty unanimously, everyone loved the concept. Designers loved it because they got to meet publishers like Hasbro, Spin Master. Normally, people you don't have access to, especially if you're new, not only just new, but international. There's some people that were participating from India, and they're like, I don't have a chance to go to Gen Con, and like, this is amazing. They were just, and one person that had like, was wheelchair bound, and he's like, I don't have a chance to fly around and do all this stuff. So this was all very amazing. And so from that, definitely a bunch got signed. I don't have full actual numbers because we stopped doing. We only did it for the 1 year. We were brainstorming out how to continue it, and we I guess it was hard to and very expensive, the ideas that we had on how we wanted to continue doing it, and it was more of a passion project. It wasn't like a way to make money. It was just let's make something where everyone can pitch to each other. And like, we have even Hasbro came up to us afterwards and like, are you gonna do another one of these, because we really enjoyed it. I'm like, wow. And a bunch of games got signed for sure.
Seems like it was beneficial for both sides, and that's a level of access that a lot of people wouldn't normally have. And I feel like that overall was just a really positive success.
I just like, I really like being in this industry and in this community of board game design and industry. Is so I like giving back to the industry whenever possible. When we first started making games and we were getting a game signed, I started a blog, and Sen co-wrote it with me, and it was just a blog on things that were happening, but I would also detail all the steps we took to get published, and that's still up on our website. And you can follow our 33 odd steps on how we got published Not saying that's how everyone gets published, but definitely a lot of people have reached out to thank us for that blog because they've followed many of those steps and have gotten published as well. And then when I started my own publishing company, oh, spoiler alert for we're not there yet.
Yep.
I did the same thing. I created a YouTube series and went through all the steps on how I started a board game company, and it's just on YouTube for free. Like, just I like being helpful and like being out there, and just I think it's beneficial for people to know, associate me with the board game industry in any way I can.
That actually segues pretty well to talking about your new board game company and the new project, Mind Management.
Yes.
We can talk about that.
Yeah. It was, so this was like 7 years ago or so. We met up with Matt Kint at Gen Con, and Matt Kint is the creator of a comic book called Mind Management, of which Sen and I both loved, and let alone other comics like Super Spy. And at that moment when we met him, I had already have and still have 2 pieces of Matt Kint's artwork hanging in my office. So I'm a big fanboy. And we met. I was so excited that we're meeting that we ended up playing games all night together. And it was so exciting. And he had played our game Acrotiri and loved it. And we obviously love Mind Management. And he just said, kind of haphazardly, I think, I don't remember it clearly, but something like, man, it would be so cool if there was a Mind Management game. And Sen and I are like immediately like, could we design that? And he's like, would you? Like, he was as like excited as we were. And we're like, yes. And we're like, that'd be awesome. So we like shook hands and like, let it be done. And so we went away and we literally failed for the next 3 years. Literally failed. We made 5 what we call alpha prototypes. Alpha being here's the first semblance of an idea. Let's see if it works. And we made 5 of those totally different game ideas and play tested them, and we didn't like any of them. And it was getting, I'm not gonna say depressing, but it was getting frustrating that there's this property, this comic I love so much that I want to contribute something to this world, and we couldn't come up with something that felt like it fit in the world. And then it was until we stumbled upon this hidden movement concept, and when we thought about that, we're like, that could feel like Mind Management. That's this idea that you're getting inside people's heads and manipulating their thoughts. That feels like you could very much do that in this kind of game. And so we made the game, and everyone was excited about it. And that took a while just to make the game. We pitched it to a bunch. Somebody signed it. We went with a smaller publisher because we thought it was going to be either, there's pros and cons to small and big publishers. With a small publisher, the con is that they're small and that their reach is not as big, but the pro is that like they need this game to succeed, and they're going to pour all their energy and love into this game because it's their, it's how they're making money is this game. So, but unfortunately, 6 months later, that company went under. So that's another con. So we got the rights back to it, and we had a meeting with Matt, Sen, and I. And we're like, so what are the next step? We have to go pitch again to another company, and like, who can we remember other publishers that liked this game? And it was Matt that just said, what if we did it ourselves? He's like, I've got graphic design background, so I could do the art and graphic design, and you guys publish it. I'm like, well, let me think about that. So I thought about it for the weekend, and I thought, went to Sen. I'm like, Sen, I could do something here, but I think I want to do it by myself because Sen has a more full-time job. I'm actually fortunate in the last 5 years. I've actually been able to go down to a part-time at my job. So I'm still there, but only 3 days a week. So I have 2 full days a week that I could dedicate to doing something. And I'm like, I think it's gonna be hard to run a business with 2 people cross country with one person already working full-time job. He's like, yeah, go for it. Because he's very much motivated to help me, quit and become a full-time game anything in the industry, which is cool. And so the next step was, okay, if I'm going to be a publisher, I might only ever publish 1 game, maybe, and that's it, because this could be a bust, who knows, or it could be good. And I'm like, well, how do I have any kind of brand identity? I kind of get a little upset's too big a word. Like it's a little sad when you see, sad's too big a word too, but the concept is sometimes you see a game and it could be published by anybody. You have no idea who published it. And you look at a lot of board game publishers like motto or reason for living and existing, and it's like, we publish great games. And it's like, well, I kind of wanted something more to hang my hat on. And I really liked restoration games as a concept. If you're familiar with them,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
restore old games from the 70s and 80s and add new mechanics to them and make them more, modern. And I'm like, and it's even in the title, restoration games. I'm like, that's wonderful. Like you know exactly what they're all about. I love it. So I thought, wonder if this game I'm making is based on a creator-owned comic book. Could I have a company that only made board games based off of creator-owned comic books? Let's try. And so that's why I became Off the Page Games, because they're coming from off the comic book pages and into your table.
Normal like starting point anyway, for a company. A lot of crossover I feel with comic book fans as well as board game fans.
What's
I'm just
interesting, yeah, what I think is interesting, what I tried to do, and I think has been successful so far, is that I actually didn't advertise in any of my marketing based on the hit comic, based on the New York Times best-selling graphic novel, Mind Management. Because, well, I think that intuitively you'd almost think you'd want to shout that out. But I know from my experience of walking around Gen Con, I very specifically remember seeing a poster for something that said that. And I had no idea what the comic was. I walked past it because I thought, well, that's not for me because I don't know what that comic is. No idea. It was that had no interest. So I walked past it. So I just advertised cool game, cool game, cool game. Check this game out. Look at this game. And later on, like, oh, by the way, there's a comic book. And it works so well that because I got all the Mind Management fans because they hear about it in their circles. And then all the board game fans talking about the board game. And then when they learned that there's a comic book, they got excited because then they were like, oh, I can read about the lore and the background and the story. That's cool. And that's like awesome. And so many people have now read the comic because of this board game, which is heartwarming that I feel like I've been able to give back in a way to Matt Kint and, get more readership for his comic series, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like the artwork and everything for it turned out phenomenal. It's such a unique package that you guys have worked on, and it looks like it was definitely created with love on every corner and every every little inside of the box. There's so many little loves and nods to it. I really appreciate the work put into it.
Thank you. Yeah, it was possibly the only board game that either of us was ever going to work on. So we just put everything in the kitchen sink but it was all based also on branding because Mind Management is all about psychic espionage. And so when you have stuff about spies and espionage, it's like there's all these hidden codes. Red blue messages comes with a red filter to read some of the messages. There's hidden codes that lead to websites. There's like all sorts of weird stuff in here that's like all on brand to Mind Management, which is to me the point of it. I'm not going to be doing that kind of stuff in the next game. It'll be something else that hopefully is on brand to that game.
You had mentioned Gen Con. Would you want to talk about your experiences at Gen Con, what Gen Con is for people?
Yeah, Gen Con is North America's biggest board game convention. It happens in Indianapolis in the summertime. And it's huge for just gamers. So gamers go, and it's like, it is a big place for announcing new games and buying games and all sorts of stuff. I've never gone as a publisher yet. So I've only attended as a designer. And but it's like football fields full of booths filled with board game publishers just trying to show you off their new games that they want to sell you, which is amazing. And then another football field full of just tables that you could play. And I'm not saying it's an actual football field, I'm just saying size wise it's inside, it's indoors. And so it's ginormous. And there's seminars you can go to, and there's all these spin-off things that you can go to that are related to board game adjacent and everything, which is wonderful. And so when I've gone to these Gen Con as a designer, in advance, I have to contact the publishers that I want to pitch to. I'm always pitching 5, 6, 7, or 8 board games when I go to one of these events. And so I have to get everything ready, and I have to contact and set up my schedule. And it eventually gets to a point where I'm running from a booth, and I'm like, okay, I'm to another booth, to another, like all day long, going from booth to booth trying to pitch, and then even after hours setting up demos of the games to the publishers that express interest. Like, can we try that tonight? Sure. And so it's like nonstop, which is to me fun and awesome, and I love it. But it's such a big haul. I should probably try to schedule things so that they're more close to each other, as opposed to, like, I don't even take that in consideration when I book my time. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to run halfway across these football fields and back, and like, but it comes to a
Whenever you
point.
want to create a path that will connect you to all your meetings.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Um, and it becomes to a point where when you're pitching at a con, at a convention, time is one of the most valuable resources for yourself and the publisher, because you have a 10, 15, 20, maybe a 30-minute window, depending on who you are and what you set up or whatever. And that's what you got your window. And if you're pitching 5, 6, 7 games, like, how do you do that? And so for me, I would have a one-page sell sheet for each of my games. And I would say, I'm going to show you really quickly all 7 of the games I brought. And then you can tell me which one you want me to spend time on. And that really respects everybody's time best. And I try to front load it with the ones I think they're really interested in. So I tailor it to that, and I go through them really quickly. And like 100% of the time, they all appreciate that. They're like, okay, I want to see that, learn more about this one and that one. Great. Pull these 2 out, forget about these, and boom. And I love publishers that are blunt and to the point, so much so that I'll be pitching, and mid-sentence they'll be like, nope, not for me. Great. Next one. Let's move on to, let's use our time wisely. That's great. And we're not wasting time on this one. That's not for you. Again, they're not saying it's a crappy game or anything. It's not for you. So time is an essence.
Is there any truth of that you guys popularized the use of sell sheets in the industry?
Well, I mean, I guess we can take credit for that. So when I first started going to conventions, Sen and I had about 5 or 6 games that we designed, and we're like, what do we do with these games? And this is back in 2009, 2008, and there was nothing online. There was no resources available. We didn't know what to do, and we were literally mailing, letters, physically mailing letters back in 2009 to publishers like, hello, we have games. Do you like games? Like, we didn't know anything. And it was through a friend. They knew a publisher who's published like 1 or 2 games, and that person said, you should go to Gamma. We're like, what's okay? So Gamma, I'm in Vancouver, and that was in Vegas, so I'm like, I'll go to Gamma. And so before going down there, based on my corporate job experience, I thought it would be a good idea to have some sort of like 1-pager sell sheet of like, is there something, some sort of summary? And so we created this. Never heard of anybody doing this, had no content. So we created a 1-pager for each of our games. And boy, oh boy, did that really help, because I went to that first convention, and a bit daft, because I wouldn't have known how to contact these publishers anyways, because even websites back then weren't like necessarily, here's all the information you need for everything you need to know. It was pretty sparse. But I literally went in cold. I went there cold. I walked up to booths cold. I'm like, hi, are you open to looking at new games? And immediately you could see the visibility that they're kind of like, they're like, they slump a little bit, because they'd rather me be a retailer that wanted to buy, a case of their games. So they're like, yeah, we're looking at games. And either they say, no, that person isn't here, or they'd say, oh, you have to come back at a certain time. Or sometimes they're like, yeah, that's it. And then I'd bring up my sell sheets, and immediately you could see that they like, oh, you could see their level of interest rose because of the professionalism of like, oh, this is well presented, and like, oh, and that was a big saving for us. And it was that first Gamma. Each of the games I brought got interest from at least 1 publisher, so we mailed them all off. All got rejected. Next year I went again. Every game I pitched got rejected except for Belfort. But Belfort was our first game that got signed, and it was more through a happenstance and luck, because I didn't literally pitch to them. I see 2 people setting up a prototype outside the hall, and I'm like, I just said, hey, do you need another playtester? And they're like, that'd be great. So I sat down playing, and they're like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm a designer too. And I showed them my sell sheets. I'm like, I looked at Belfort, like, this looks cool. Can we try this one after? I'm like, oh, that's super nice. Yeah, sure. It wasn't until halfway through playing this game that I realized they're not designers. They're the publishers that are publishing Homesteaders at the time. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I was in the middle of a pitch. And they played Belfort. They loved it. They played it again the next day. They loved it. And at the end of the convention, they're like, can we sign this game? I'm like, oh. So it was a really happenstance. Yeah.
It sounds like at conventions that's just the walking by a table or just the happenstance of meeting and talking to the right people just is where a lot of the magic happens.
It's true. It's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, so I want to round back to your Kickstarter campaign for my management. So you decided that since publisher had fallen through, that you were going to start it yourself. What were your steps going through creating your Kickstarter, and tell us about your experiences on there.
I have a whole YouTube series available for you to watch on that. Yeah, a lot of people think, I won't say a lot of people, a lot of new people to the scene think that Kickstarter is a way to put something out there and then people will come, flocking to your game and just make your game a success. And that is not true. If you just put your game out there with no effort, you will get zero success. It's very rare that you'd ever get any other kind of success because you need influencers, you need advertising, you need a lot of extra work. You have to bring your followers to you is the most common feedback you'll get from anybody to someone who's failed at a Kickstarter. It's like you need to bring people with you. So that day one is so important to Kickstarter right now, to show that people like success. People want to be around success. People are interested in success, and they're like, oh, what are people backing? A lot of people are backing this. Oh, this funded in 12 minutes. Oh, what is this? And they want to know more about it. And that just grows and grows and grows. And you don't get that unless you have a lot of people interested on day one. So you have to build up your mailing list. Now, fortunately, at this point, when we did this, Sen and I had, a modicum of a name. Like, we're not like, I don't know, Matt Leacock or something like that, but we have a bit of a name in the industry. And Matt Kint and my management has a bit of a brand. So there's a little bit, we're hoping that we would get some good traction on day one. And we did really well, did 191,000 in our 30-day Kickstarter, which is amazing. And then I'm going to fast forward to the story for a bit because it's amazing. We sold out of the first print run. And I was planning on my second print run along with a few other languages from foreign partners that signed on, getting ready to do that in the beginning of March of this year that we're talking about right now, that I'm in right now, 2022. And on February 2nd, Shut Up and Sit Down, which is not something I'm telling you to do. That's the name of a content creator's website. And the most influential board game content creators on the planet, as evident by the story I'm about to tell you. February 2nd, they put a review out for my management, which was phenomenal. Like their reviews are very funny and entertaining, which is great. And they loved it. So Quinns was absolutely ecstatic about it. He used the word masterpiece in the headline, which is wonderful. So what does everyone do? Everyone wants the game now. Guess what? We're fully sold out of everything. Make it matters worse, they were given the deluxe unit by my European supplier who supplied them the game, but they didn't know it was the deluxe unit. And so they don't usually review deluxe units. And so now it was even worse because now the deluxe unit is like literally out of stock, like never to be published again was the thought. And so on that day, I had a couple of people message me like, you should do another Kickstarter. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, well, you can't just do another Kickstarter. My thought of the rules of Kickstarter is you have to do something different to bring it back. And that's why most people will bring out like an expansion. But like, who's going to want an expansion for my management? The game comes with 14 sealed mini packages in the game already. Like nobody's through that and wanting more content already. And so I'm like, I don't know. And then somebody said, what about those secret cards? We have these little secret cards with these codes that lead you to a website where you can print out your own secret cards and add them to the game. What if you printed those up for people? And at first I'm like, who's going to want that? You have the cards. You can print them yourself. I'm like, no, people want the nice. I'm like, and then by February 3rd, next day, that night, I started creating a Kickstarter page. I'm like, create a Kickstarter page. I'm trying to think. We have a print run planned. I contacted my manufacturer in China. I'm like, hey, if I did a Kickstarter and we had more units, can we just add more units to my current print run that's planned? And they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. Okay. So I did a Kickstarter. It launched on February 8th, 5 days after I thought, like 6 days earlier, I had no idea at all I was doing a Kickstarter. And so I did a Kickstarter, added these secret mission cards, and that did $782,000. And I'm like, what is going on? I couldn't believe it. I was so blown away. And I just leaned into the fact that the challenge with often most Kickstarter games is the lack of a guarantee that this is a good game or not, because you don't know. You have all these previews that you pay for, so maybe they're biased or not. Who knows? But in a game that's already out and you have actual reviews of people saying, and it made the top 10 lists, about like a dozen different content creators put Mind Management in their top 10 list for 2021. So it's almost like a guarantee the game is good in that sense.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
That's an amazing thing to come in the second run and just completely blow it out of the water. Well deserved. I want to commend you on the other awards that the game's received. I saw it was most innovative game, was it, for 2021?
Yeah, from Board Game
Yeah,
Quest. Yeah,
yeah.
that's amazing. I'm very excited about that. We're up for that as well in the Dice Tower Awards for most innovative and for best game from a small publisher. And I think for best game even we're even up for best game of the year from on Dice Tower, which is wild. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm rooting for you. Let's talk about the pandemic. So I guess we starting a Kickstarter in the pandemic. I hate to bring it down a little bit here.
Well, actually, I started it March 1st or something like that, 2020. There was no pandemic. And then March 17th, halfway through my campaign, is when things started to shut down. Halfway through my actual campaign is when who knows if that affected it negatively or positively or at all. I have no idea if it affected it. It's really hard. There's no A/B testing and that kind of a thing.
How has I guess how has that affected both like your ability to get the products shipped and to get it manufactured? Was there any difficulties you had during that?
Like on one side, the positive was I'm not going out socializing and doing other things, so I had a lot more time to focus on bringing this baby out into the world, which is on one hand that's a good thing. The downside was, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the shipping crisis that has happened during the pandemic. That has been a real pinch in our side. So I got in as the shipping crisis was starting, and so for those that are listening, don't understand, to put your games from China, unfortunately everything's pretty much got to be made in China. Otherwise, the cost is going to be astronomical for your game if you don't print in China. Anyways, so then you have to put them into a container, and that goes on a boat, and it goes across the Pacific, and then it comes to somewhere in America, and that's fine. That used to cost $3 or $4 for a container, and to get it shipped across. That's what it was. That's what it cost. I paid $11,000, and I was like, oh my god, I'm paying $11,000 for this. And it used to cost 3 or 4, and I'm like, holy cow. But I was lucky because it has increased. Some people paid $35,000 for that same container size, and like that just will break you. And so I've actually had to literally increase the price going forward of my management. It used to be $50 US, now it's $60 US, because I will literally lose money if the container prices are $35,000. So that was, and not only that, that's part one of the cost, and then there would be a backlog of weeks of waiting in the port because all these boats are coming in and no boats are going back to China at all. And so they can't even get their boats in, and now you're paying for daily storage fees, and like I've heard it's starting to calm down a bit, but it's just a big variable right now that's scaring a lot of people in the industry. Many people might have noticed this past holiday season, game prices have already gone up.
Yeah, and when you look at a lot of people who are running their own games, making maybe like 40 or 50,000, and they have to throw 30,000 onto shipping, that is just more than half of what they raised.
I know. I don't know how you can do it. Yeah. I mean, if it's a smaller game, maybe you can share your container with another publisher. There's ways to do that if you're not filling a full container. But I was filling more than a full container, so I had to actually get 2 containers. So 11,000 for one container, and then the other one was going to Canada, and that was cheaper, thank God.
Yeah, hopefully that's something that we can move on from, and hopefully we'll move on to a brighter future. I guess I'm curious now where you see sort of like the future of game design now. Now that we've started doing like online meetups and playtests.
Mhm.
Do you feel like there's still a space for just in-person game conventions, or do you feel like online has taken a lot of?
I mean, there better be a place for in person, because I've definitely noticed some publishers publishing games that I could look at and say, I bet you this game was designed solely in the online world and play tested solely in the online world, because it's got a big setup, or there's a lot of components that are easily scripted and managed in an online world, like using a program called Tabletop Simulator or Tabletop Playground or Tabletopia, that can handle that very easily. But in the real world, oh my god, that's a lot of little bits that have to go out and manage and stuff. Like, you have to. I'm hoping publishers are still play testing live and in person. Even myself, my next game from my as a publisher is called Harrow County, and I was playtesting that prior to the campaign, was playing testing live, but it changed so much during the pandemic, and that's when we actually got the rights to do it in the Harrow County world, and that changed a ton. And we were playing online, everything's great. And then I went to Gamma and I printed everything out, got it all, like the art was getting done by the artist and everything like that. And that's not until I did that I realized that the board is too small. I'm like, oh my goodness. Because in the digital world, you can stretch things, shrink things, and it's like it's hard to really notice. And so I'm like, okay, this has got to change. We got to change this. So that's pretty wild. Yeah. As far as what was the question? What's the future of games? Is and game design.
Design.
Yeah, and so online, well, I think a lot of people really will. It'll still flourish, and it's easier to iterate online. It was unbelievable when I had to go and make an actual physical prototype for Harrow County. I'm like, I haven't done this in 2 years. I actually literally cut my fingernail off because I'm like, how do I use a knife? Wow. Um, and
What is now involved in?
yeah, which is appropriate for the brand of Harrow County. Maybe I should, put that in the marketing. My literal blood is in this game. Um, but iterating a physical prototype is a lot of work, especially if like you have to change all your cards after one playtest because the balance is all off. Like, oh my god, all the printing and all the cutting and all this unsleeving and resleeving. It's a lot of work. Digital, it's like, change the things and re-upload. It's like super easy, so it's very attractive. Let alone we're still not out of the pandemic, so people are still cautious about meeting in live anyways right now. So that's slowly growing in some areas, but still cautious. I just got back from the gathering, but that had over 20 people got COVID at that thing. So it's still like, wow, that's weird, because we were all wearing masks, and it's ever at dinner time or something like that. And I'm like, whoa, man. So I'm hoping there's more in-person stuff coming soon, a little bit, because at the start of the pandemic is when my journal, the Fail Faster Playtesting Guide, came out. I had kickstarted that earlier, and it came out at the beginning of the pandemic, like into people's hands, and then nobody's now going to do in-person playtesting. So this really works really well. I mean, you could use this for online playtesting, of course, but it's more, I find it better in person. And so that kind of fell off the radar for a lot of people. So I'm hoping to get this back on the radar as we start to ramp up and get back to the normal world. And I have 2 more projects in the pipes to continue the Fail Faster brand, which I'm excited about.
I was lent one of the early journals to try out and to give feedback to by one of our local game developers, and it was fantastic, at least just for organizing my thoughts anyway.
Great. Oh, wonderful.
When you're playtesting, it's just you're taking in so much information. It's very hard to kind of like parse that information of the game, while you're there at the table.
Yeah. And I was happily stumbled upon an idea. I love happy accidents. That's like magical. Happy accidents are magical. And I think that happens when you surround yourself with talented people. When you surround, and everyone is, and so for the Fail Faster, the happy accident was my graphic designer for the cover, on his own, kind of made like a Boy Scout badge look to it with all these icons. And it gave me this idea of a Boy Scout badge of like, I wonder if we could earn badges somehow. And I actually, because of that, turn the whole playtesting journal into a gamified concept where as you playtest, you level yourself up and you earn stickers and you put them on your cover as if you're earning badges. And I'm like, what a wonderful connection that I made through my partner that was helping me with this game in a different capacity and elevated the game to something different. That's, I think, one of the best things about any kind of partnership or collaboration is that those happy accidents where it's like he's not even in the design of this from a game designer perspective at all. He's not even a game designer. He had asked so many questions, but this came of it because of that. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Um, yeah, I feel like that is pretty much everything I really had to talk to you about. I won't take up too much more of your time. For people who want to find out more and watch your YouTube series on your Kickstarter journey, or find out more about your games, what's the best way to find out?
You can go to offthepagegames.com. There's a video link in there for to check out the YouTube series if you want to know, which is called How to Start a Board Game Company, which I think was maybe a little bit more hubris would have been better because it's like it's definitely not how to start a board game company. It's how I started a board game company, which may or may not be the best way. I don't know, but it's how I did it, and so far it's been working pretty good for me though.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty good.
and the same thing for all my handles are off the page games, so off Twitter or Facebook or whatever, it's all off the page games.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Jay. And yeah, we'll see you guys later. Thanks for tuning in.
My pleasure.